welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at BTV World, of course, with Farooq Batafi and Raja Faisal. In today's show, we will be taking a look at the important developments happening in Pakistan, with, of course, the much debated controversy around what the president, of course, also spoke about earlier, and then, of course, measures pertaining to the conduct of the general elections also under discussion. We know that earlier the president had written to the Chief Election Commissioner of Pakistan talking about how the 90-day time period needs to be respected, and that this is something that the Election Commission of Pakistan and the president should sit together about and ensure that that in fact does happen. And so he had called for a meeting with the Chief Election Commissioner, something that he had done so previously as well when we saw the caretaker setups being established in KP and Punjab. Then also we saw that the ECP had denied these invitations to consultations, and the president had then proceeded with announcing a decision on the date unilaterally, which was not on which, of course, the elections were not conducted. It's important, of course, to understand the way that the Constitution looks at the matter as well, especially pertaining to what the CEC has also replied in his letter to the president. The article that has been mentioned by the president is 48.5, and this is important in terms of the president having the right to decide the date of the elections and fix them, also notwithstanding any prime ministerial advice according to Article 48.1. But there are a number of opinions regarding whether this is something that is actually moving forward the way that it needs to be interpreted, and with different people having different opinions. So we're going to try and explore this further as well, as to in what case and scenarios will the Prime Minister's advice not be necessary or followed, since Article 45 also includes a statement of notwithstanding anything written in 48.1. There is also, of course, the CEC's mention of the fact that due to such constitutional aspects, there is, of course, also the fact that if the National Assembly was dissolved as per the President, then only will this 90-day time period be respected, and then the President will be able to then decide the matter. Otherwise, according to the amendment in the Elections Act, this is now something that rests with the ECP, in fact, and they don't need to consult with the president on the matter. And this is important, especially in terms of the kind of timeline that we're looking at, given the fact that new delimitations are in order after the new census results were approved by CCI. So a question, of course, remains as to what really is the current scenario and who really has the power to decide the timeline of the election date, and whether or not, if there is no meeting, as CSC has pointed out that it will be of scant importance, then if this is something that happens, will the president be able to take a decision as before, and what sort of value will that actually hold? So we're going to try and explore that further in our first segment. Our next one also takes a look at another legal scenario which is of importance as well. Of course, the TOSHAKHANA case is something that has been much talked about, involving, of course, the former Prime Minister. And this is something that is being under discussion, particularly after his arrest and then his conviction also for corrupt practices, which resulted in a sentence for 3 years and him being disqualified to participate in the election process for 5 years. And so we, of course, now are at the point where the discussion is around what is going on in the Islamabad High Court and what is going on in the Supreme Court, with the Supreme Court bench reiterating its decision to halt proceedings moving forward until the decision of the plea that is already pending under the Islamabad court has been decided. But it did acknowledge the fact that there were procedural defects with the previous conviction, something that the Pakistan Bar Council has also raised its concerns against, saying that this is not something that should have happened, or the Supreme Court should not have interfered in matters which are still pertaining to the subordinate judiciary. And so we're going to explore this further in terms of what this means and how is this going to eventually result in the powers that the Supreme Court has moving forward, and the kind of decisions we're going to be seeing stemming from the Islamabad High Court. So for this and more, of course, we have in the studios Faisal and Farooq with us, and we'll be joined soon online by our legal experts as well to develop the story further and get an understanding better of the constitutional requirements. But Farooq, let me start with you. Given the CEC's reply, we've spoken about the president's letter before as well, and of course now we see, in line with something that we have seen the ECP doing previously as well, they have reiterated that this is something that is not going to result in anything productive, is of scant importance, and that moving forward with the Elections Act, now the power does rest with the ECP. However, there are, of course, a lot of other ways recognize that the president and some other quarters are also looking at the current situation. How do you see the CEC's reply, and do you think that this is something as apparent and obvious as it seems, and what the CEC is talking about, or is it as nuanced and complicated that it will eventually be decided by the courts?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think that it goes back to what we were discussing yesterday and what I kept on saying also. After 18th Amendment, after new amendments or changes to the law, we know that the President's office does not have agency in this matter. So this is for the second time that the President has shown kind of initiative, but there must be some kind of pressure on him to do something of this sort from his base constituency, that is PTI. So he has actually started making or trying to make life difficult for other people, right? And therefore his letter is there, but we have seen two swings to two extremes: silent mode of the President and cooperation, and then confrontation. I think that this whole thing started after his tweet regarding two laws, and after that, because it alienated his own bureaucracy that serves him as well, in the end he thought that if he has to go down, he should be combative. And secondly, he is also retiring in the start of the next month, or he is supposed to, right? With that kind of situation, he wrote a letter. But as we have pointed out yesterday, and I actually predicted this, that there won't be any consequences right now, because CEC is fully empowered under the law. And remember that it was the Prime Minister's guidance through which assemblies were dissolved. So it essentially involves Prime Minister or then CEC that you actually decide the date of the election. So that is what is going to happen. Right now, what I understand, as I pointed out yesterday as well, that Article 51(5) and 228 regarding these issues are in conflict. The one that talks about 60 or 90 days of time period, and the one that actually talks about delimitation, and especially including the census results. So what is going to happen? This matter essentially will have to go to the court, and it will be the Election Commission that will have to take this matter to the court for the interpretation of the law, because interpretation of law essentially comes under the purview of the Supreme Court of Pakistan or the courts which are relevant. So with that kind of a situation, we still have to wait and see. Your second discussion topic is also linked to this, because we know that Supreme Court has a very different manner of operation these days, and today Chief Justice of Pakistan actually commented on media's criticism as well. With due respect, when you keep on shrinking a bench and only 3 or 4 people actually become the custodian of whatever is being said or decided, then criticism will come, and because of that there is this problem. And by the way, CJ is also retiring next month. So with that kind of a situation, now the question is how this matter will be interpreted. There is a possibility that Election Commission might take this issue to Supreme Court after the incumbent retires.
Okay, and Farooq, there are some who are speaking about how the Elections Amendment Act is not something when viewed together with the Constitution will have more important. Yes. So with the kind of articles that the President has also quoted in his letter, do you still think that it is the amendment that takes precedence?
Look, the law that you are mentioning is secondary, of course, to the Constitution. But I am not actually bringing up that. I am mentioning an article of the Constitution, that is 51(5), right? And that article clearly says that when the results of census have been notified, they have been published, then you have to actually go for delimitation. Why would you do that? Because you have to include the people of Pakistan. What is the point of democracy or election if not to count people in? If somebody is arguing, like PTI actually went to Chief Election Commissioner today, and they said that don't actually go for delimitation, new delimitation or new constituencies, and that actually begs the question of why the hell would any person or any party that believes in democracy would want to exclude new voters or people who have to be counted. Remember that while voting actually takes place according to the electoral rolls, and I am open to the idea that those people who have been now counted through census might have already been included in electoral rolls, because delimitation actually changes the demography of a constituency. Why would you say that a person who actually belongs to certain constituencies should not be voting or should be voting somewhere else where his vote is not actually supposed to be counted? So
right.
With that kind of a situation, one has to actually wait and see what becomes. But this idea that somehow the article regarding 90 days and supersedes the earlier article that I mentioned, I don't think there's any room for that kind of interpretation.
Okay.
The only thing is that our media and our pundits are politicized, and they want to actually stick with whatever is convenient. And because 90 days is a definite, clause or definite kind of time frame, so they want to stick to it while forgetting other clauses or articles of the Constitution.
Okay, let us also welcome in the discussion Hafiz Ehsan Khokar Saab, Advocate Supreme Court, who's joined us online. Thank you very much, Hafiz Saab, for being part of the discussion. And I hope that you can help us clear out some of these understandings as well as to what really is going to have precedence over the other. There are a number of course, articles that are under consideration. There is, of course, the 48.5 that the President has also spoken about. There is, of course, 244, which is again also mentioned in the letter. And then, of course, the Elections Amendment Act and the fact that there is the argument from the CEC that the power rests with the ECP. But of course, the President has quoted something else given as evidence of his right or his decision deciding the date of the elections. At the same time, there is also the discussion around whether the 90-day time period is something which is going to be more important than, of course, the new census results and delimitations. And then, of course, moving forward, whether or not that this is something that we're going to be, when we take a look in the general sense of how exactly will then the next procedure be decided, will eventually come forth with regards to the ECP or the President. In line with all of these various aspects, what do you think will then be the most important aspect at the moment, and who do you think stands at a point which you think will win in the court?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much for inviting me in your show. There are two aspects of this case. One aspect is that who is the competent under the Constitution to issue the schedule of the general election under the Constitution, different provisions. And the second would be that what is the time to trigger the election schedule. Now we are talking about the second issue. The second issue is there is no issue doubt in this situation that 90 days is a sacrosanct period if the assembly is dissolved on the advice of the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and if the assembly completes its natural tour, the law says, the Constitution says it is a 60 days. But before that, triggering into the period enshrined in Article 224 of the Constitution, it is much important that when that particular period starts. The period start would be as per the Article 51.5 of the Constitution, that the next election of the country will be held on the basis of the census notified by the federal government. And if the federal government notifies the new census, then the election would be held under that. And who is the responsible? And the law says, the Constitution says, that under Article 222 of the Constitution, it is the legal and constitutional responsibility of the Election Commission of Pakistan to decide about the limitations or the delimitations, and there is a certain provision in Section 17 of the Election Act 2017. Now we are talking about the first. The first is either we can go beyond 51.5 of the Constitution without adhering the provisions of that and go straight away into the Article 224 of the Constitution. The answer is no. First, you have to comply with the command of the Constitution given by the Council of Common Interest under Article 53 of the Constitution. And that situation is binding upon all the state institutions, including the President of Pakistan and the Election Commission of Pakistan. And if someone is aggrieved by the decision of the CCI, he can only challenge, he can't challenge in a Supreme Court on the basis of consensus. It is the competent of the parliament, they can undo through a joint resolution. So there is no issue at all by that without adhering the decisions of the CCI given under Article 53 of 153 of the Constitution, the Election Commission of Pakistan is constitutionally and legally under the obligation to take first step given under Article 51(5) read with their Section 17 of the Election Act 2017. So this is the first proposition. The second proposition starts when the process given under the Article 51 and 16 has been completed, because the period of 90 days or the 60 days would start from that day when the period is given under Article 51(5) and 17 of the Election Act has been completed. So if we talk about in the first stage, we are in the first stage. So without completing into the first stage, either the President or the Election Commission of Pakistan has no legal or constitutional mandate to issue a notification or about the schedule of the election on the basis of Article 48(5) of the Constitution or on the basis of the Article 224 of the Constitution. But now coming to the letter of the President of the Pakistan, it is very much clear that the President has issued a letter to the Election Commission of Pakistan, knowing the fact that the Assembly was not dissolved under Article 48 of the Constitution, because the Article 48 of the Constitution commands to the President of Pakistan that he would act only on the advice of the Prime Minister or the Cabinet Chief. So the summary was made under Article 58 of the Constitution. The President, if doesn't accept the advice, it is automatically resolved. So he has made the resolution under Article 58 of the Constitution. And what he is being referred by him about the Article 48(5) of the Constitution, that will arise in a situation only that where the President of Pakistan can dissolve the Assembly without the advice of the Prime Minister. And that situation is that if some motion is being moved against any sitting Prime Minister, vote of no confidence, if it is succeeded, and then there is another option that there will be election in the National Assembly for electing the leader of the House. And if someone has failed to get the majority, and the magic number is the 173 of the Constitution in terms of the National Assembly, then there is an option for the President of Pakistan, a constitutional option, that he will dissolve the National Assembly and he will announce the election schedule.
Right, but Hafiz Saab, if you can clarify something for us, in Article 48(5), if I'm not wrong, and correct me if I am, but in Article 48(5), I'm not sure if this distinction that you're drawing between the President dissolving the assemblies or the assemblies being dissolved with the Prime Ministers are mentioned. In Article 48(5), it's about of course, the President being able to set the date for elections, and it also, which a lot of people are quoting, includes the statement, notwithstanding what is being said in Article 48(1), which then, of course, refers to the Prime Ministerial advice that you're talking about. So if Article 48(5) says all of that, then what are you reading it with to sort of then reconcile this with the fact that the assemblies were not dissolved by the President?
And Khokhar Saab, if you can allow me, if it is understood that the date would be coming obviously from the Election Commissioner, can we expect a date? Of course, it is expected that it should be around 90 days as the Constitution says, but if it is not the 90 days in case of obviously delimitation process, and obviously it takes time, and more time is required to do it, then what should we be expecting? The delay, how many months of a delay is allowed to the Election Commissioner to go for, and what kind of precedents we have from the past?
And you're lucky day, Hafiz Saab. I want to add to the question as well. My question is regarding this inflexibility of certain clauses or articles which fail to see the systemic weaknesses of the whole project, especially elections. When Election Commission does not have the kind of resources or human resource or financial resources, or for that matter ability to conduct delimitation in a stipulated time, why is it that the Constitution all of a sudden goes silent on the matter?
Now, first I come to the point on this side that the Constitution is not comprising of one article. The Constitution has more than 280 articles in our Constitution. So the most important thing is that if there are certain issues right in the different articles of the Constitution to address a particular issue, like we are confronting now the election in Pakistan, so we have to read all the articles. We can't say singly on the basis of Article 51(5) of the Constitution. We can't say directly that Article 48.
Right, unfortunately, I think, have lost contact with Hafizab, but a number of important legal questions that we're going to explore further, and I think he's back with us. Hafizab, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Great, I'm glad you're back. Continue.
Yeah, so if we take all the articles in a way to reach the final spirit of the Constitution, so the final spirit of the Constitution starts with the decision of the ECC, because this has been a very extraordinary, exceptional case in Pakistan. Earlier, there was, the decision of the CCI regarding the census, but there was a time for the forthcoming election of the general election in Pakistan. But in that particular situation, the decision was made as the last, the hours, you can say the days of the former government. They announced the decision. So if they announce the decision, the triggering section is the Article 51(5) of the Constitution. So that article cast upon the duty of the Election Commission of Pakistan. And I must say that the President of Pakistan is also very much aware, the Election Commission of Pakistan is very much aware. Even the political parties who are, talking about the 90 days, they are very well aware about the sensitivity of the Article 51 of the Constitution, because I'm giving one example on it, that the last election was held on the basis of the provisional election census in 2018. And there was the 24th constitutional amendment was to be made by the parliament just to verify that there will be a provisional, the delimitations, and that will be the basis on the upcoming, the final approval by the CCI. And that decision was taken in the 2021 by the PTI government for the digital census in Pakistan. So there is no ambiguity in the Constitution. The Constitution is very much clear. You have to comply with the Article 51(5) of the Constitution. Then you move on the other side. And for the other side, while going over there are two things. One thing is what the Constitution says, and what about the statute says. So the Constitution says that it is a prerogative now under the Constitution, if the Assembly is dissolved by the President of Pakistan on the advice under Article 58(1) of the Constitution. So it is the Election Commission of Pakistan to announce the schedule of the election. And that is supported by the Election Act made in Article 222 of the Constitution, which cast upon under Section 57 and 58 of the Constitution, where the power of the consultation of the President has been waived by the Parliament and have been absolutely given to the legislature. So Article 224 cast upon the Election Commission of Pakistan, Article 51 of the Constitution. And now, interestingly, the President has issued a letter to the Election Commission of Pakistan, and he has received a reply on the next date. And very interestingly, he has referred a letter to the Law and Justice Division. So before going to the Election Commission of Pakistan, President is the highest office of the country. If it would have been more appropriate, after sending the letter to the President, to the Election Commission of Pakistan, and received a reply to the Election Commission of Pakistan, to the presidency, he should have earlier approached the Law and Justice Division, get a clarification over there. And if they support that this is, sir, the legal and constitutional proposition, he should write a letter, and the Election Commission of Pakistan will say, sir, now there is an advice, because the Ministry of Law and Justice is binding upon all the state institutions as far as the matter relates to the governance and the constitutional matters in Pakistan. And then if someone is agreed, he can go to the Supreme Court of Pakistan. But now, knowing the fact that everything is clear in the Constitution, the presidency, the Election Commission of Pakistan, and the political parties, they are playing in those areas which are absolutely not relevant in this situation, and creating a confusion in Pakistan, which is not in the interest of Pakistan.
And Hafizab, that's an excellent point, and that's important, of course, also in terms of how when we see people such as the President and, of course, decision makers who are involved in such process, and we see these actions taken, we wonder why exactly the procedures or the information was not processed the way it needs to be. And it brings me to another point also, when we talk about the clarity that you're referring to and the fact that there is no ambiguity in the Constitution. It seems that whatever areas that we're discussing, it seems that they're very clear as to what the stance is. And so that points towards, Faisal, the fact that when we take a look at different political parties, even the President's office or others who are politically involved in the matter, of course, they are also people who are very, very aware of the Constitution, who understand what the procedures are, and of course this is something that they deal with on a daily basis. So why is it that we haven't really heard not just different institutions within the system, but also of course different political parties and stakeholders also upholding the Constitution or the democratic principles that are required in this matter, if indeed there is no ambiguity?
It's a $1 million question, Sana.
Okay.
Why I say this? Because they are the ones who should be, of course, most worried about it. But right now, of course, we are seeing as if they are not bothered at all, that they are looking for a date or not. And one further development which we are seeing is, I mean, today earlier I went through one of the WhatsApp messages from one of the leaders of TLP. They are disgruntled over the fact that they will not be invited by Election Commission for consultation for what kind of the dates, proposed dates for the elections should be there. So
You
it is
didn't, sorry to cut you,
Yeah.
but you didn't find similar kind of WhatsApp message from TTP?
no,
Okay.
none others. I was most worried about the other parties, you know, like somebody would come up, but obviously rest of all parties, it is understood that they have been contacted, that some kind of consultation from Election Commission of Pakistan would be with them. And of course, once that consultation is there, we can understand that of course Election Commissioner, he wants to consult it with all of the political parties. All of the political parties would be deciding along with the Election Commission the proposed date for the elections. So here it is a situation where, of course, when consultation was asked for and required by the President of the President of Pakistan, of course it was not granted, and that truly just because of the Constitution. But here I think it is a good initiative by the Election Commission to of course seek consultation with the political parties, because they are the ones who would be most affected and most bothered about the date, whichever it comes out, in case of if it is a period more than the 90 days. So now of course one request that TLP, being a party that took seats in the previous elections as well, and politically it is active on the ground, I believe they should be part of the consultation as well.
Do you plan to run for office also
Which one?
in election?
No.
I thought that perhaps you are ensuring that you
No,
get a ticket.
being someone
Yeah.
who's a journalist gets
Okay.
contacted by the leaders of a particular political party. Of course, they contacted me just to highlight it, that they have been ignored from the political system of Pakistan, and they wanted to be part of it. That's why I just wanted to highlight.
All right.
It's complicated, by the way.
All right, and Farooq, I want to explore further what we were earlier discussing, because when we take a look at, especially of course, given the fact that when we talk about areas which apparently seem very clear, or where what Hafizah was also referring to, in these cases, of course, there are people who are experts in their fields. Of course, there are advisors, and there's a lot of meetings and consultations that take place. It seems that what we're talking about on a TV show would be discussed hopefully in much more detail in other quarters. But when we take a look at these decisions, then perhaps there may be some other objective or some other gain that people who make such decisions and measures are then looking at. And there may be many, and we've discussed that previously as well. But then I want to understand that when we take a look at the scenario where there may be some areas under the Constitution which can be explored for personal or political gain, then how is it that even though the Constitution is a living document, is that we haven't come so far in at least being able to secure areas which seem so obvious under discussion, and that even those areas are apparently open for as a playground.
Right, Sana, thank you very much. So basically, you want me to answer my own question that I put to Hafiz Saab earlier. But you're right, Constitution of Pakistan is a living document, but it usually stays in the ICU, right? And every time there's operations going on its heart. You know, I kept on pointing out that since 1973, when this constitution first actually appeared as a consensus social contract, since then there have been not only amendments to it, immediately I think the framers immediately amended it, but after that also, because Pakistan has a checkered democratic history and civil military imbalance in the past, because of that, we have seen miracles taking place. For example, this constitution had name of a journal dictator, that was Ziaul Haq, as an exemption being mentioned in the constitution. Then it was later removed. But then I started, covering constitutional, amendments on parliamentary democracy since 1997. And in those days, I remember that there was this 13th Amendment that actually nullified the 8th Amendment, 52(8)(b) and all that. With that kind of a situation, we saw a tug of war. Sometimes you will have 58(2)(b) back in the Constitution, sometimes it is gone, when the President's office had the powers to dissolve an assembly with his own agencies, right? After that, we have seen that 18th Amendment has corrected that, but between 13th and 18th, there was 17th Amendment that was brought in by a dictator, that was General Musharraf, right? With that kind of a situation, your constitution has become a patchwork quilt. And the biggest problem is, since 1997, what I have been covering is, and it breaks my heart, every year, or every election, all major parties gather together, try to amend the election laws, and also improve the constitutional, articles regarding these issues, but in order to enhance the quality of election. But every time we see three things. One, whenever elections take place, they are messy. Second, the victor takes the prize, but there are people who lose and who refuse to accept the loss, and they accuse that there was a rigging. So all this business of amending the law has never produced an election that could have satisfied all the parties, right? With that kind of situation, my biggest problem is that framers and amenders of the Constitution, they do not have the kind of imagination that was needed. For example, this 90-day clause, right, is important. I understand we need democracy. But what we saw in Punjab, where security issue was there and security could not be provided and funds were not there, and then our Chief Justice of Pakistan actually brought in the Governor State Bank to actually calculate and find monies. Right? I mean, this is not their business, but they were doing it. With that kind of a situation, my question is, why is it the Constitution framers and amenders have not been able to come up with a remedy on this issue as well? Did they not have imagination? For example, we recently emerged out of COVID. Just imagine on election day, you have COVID-like situation, some pandemic, and people cannot actually show up. Are you going to say that elections have to take place even if the turnout is 0%? You can't, right? So with that kind of a situation, the Constitution has to have an answer. It is not Supreme Court's job to always keep on interpreting the law just because the Parliament of Pakistan has dropped the ball. And the Parliament of Pakistan, mashallah, keeps on dropping the ball all the time. So these are important questions. And you have to look at it, and you have to realize that future legislators will have to fix these problems. If they don't, then we are actually basically unhinging the system for eternity.
Absolutely. We're going to be also exploring, of course, what you referred to earlier as well, Farooq, the TOSHAKHANA case as well, and what the Supreme Court's role in that has been. And this is also important to the discussion. Hafizah, with reference to, of course, what has been discussed, we know that the Supreme Court has spoken about the fact that it's going to be sticking to its decision regarding halting proceedings until the matter has been decided under the High Court. At the same time, it has also acknowledged and expressed concerns regarding procedural defects in the previous conviction, something which the Pakistan Bar Council has also pointed out and said that this is something that should not have happened, and that the Supreme Court should not be interfering in the matters that are already sub judice in a different court. Given all of this scenario, then, what do you think is the rightful behavior by a Supreme Court judge or by the Chief Justice of Pakistan of any other decision pending before another court? Of course, any remark cannot be made recklessly. We've seen that unfortunately happening before as well. But what do you think this amounts to, and how do you see these comments made by the Chief Justice?
Again, I am saying that the present proceeding which is pending before the Supreme Court of Pakistan, with the reference we have already talked about, it has become infructuous and non-maintainable. Because very interestingly, the former Prime Minister has challenged those such interim orders passed by the Islamabad High Court, which later on the conviction was passed by the trial court. So for the sake of argument, if Supreme Court of Pakistan would decide these cases in favor of the former Prime Minister by accepting their appeals, it would not have given any benefit to the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, because later on and earlier, the trial court announced his conviction, and the matter is challenged before the High Court, and the High Court is listening appeals of the former Prime Minister, and both the sides have been arguing for the last 2 days. That's why you have seen that the Supreme Court of Pakistan passing an order, despite there was certain observation by the Supreme Court regarding the prima facie the sentence passed by the trial court, because it would be very difficult for the Supreme Court of Pakistan to decide such an issue which is not before him as an appeal before the Supreme Court of Pakistan, because the Supreme Court does not have under the Constitution the judicial superintendence over the High Court and the trial court. And more importantly, when the pending interim order, which has been merged into the final order by the trial court by having a different order through conviction against the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. So it would be more appropriate for the Supreme Court of Pakistan, if they think that there was certain prima facie favoring the things to the former Prime Minister, the first round of litigation, they stop the proceedings of the trial court and decide the points raised by the petitioner over there. So at that time, they did not pass any restraining order of the proceedings before the trial court, and they asked and they said that we will not pass any restraining order against the trial court. So importantly, when the Islamabad High Court passed the order, he issued two directions. One direction was that he asked directly to the trial court to have considered the technical objections raised, or the legal objection raised by the petitioner, and second is then to pass an order. But the former Prime Minister did not join the proceeding, despite he was appearing before the court. He was charge sheeted over there. His lawyer made the cross-examination against the witnesses produced by the Election Commission of Pakistan. And more importantly, he made a statement under Section 342 of the CRPC, which is a very essential before the conclusion of the trial. And there is no doubt that the trial was conducted by the trial court. There are certain discrepancies over there. But I'm talking about the pending position of the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Yes.
The pending position of Pakistan, the Supreme Court will not be able to pass an order on such order, because the Supreme Court can pass only such order on a live issue. So at the moment which is pending before the Supreme Court of Pakistan is not a live issue. The live issue is still with the High Court. That's why Supreme Court is asking that we are waiting the decision of the High Court. So
my primary concern is not that. My primary concern is not that. Right now, I'm not talking about the kind of measures that perhaps may or may not be questionable under that conviction. My concern is that, interestingly enough, apparently what the Supreme Court or the Chief Justice of Pakistan are saying is that we shouldn't be, or we won't be talking on a matter that is pending under the court. But at the same time, they have also slipped and commented, in fact, on that matter. And so I want to understand, what value does that hold legally? What sort of impact will that hold when the Supreme Court is making a comment about a case that is pending under the Islamabad High Court? Will it not impact their decision? And even though they're saying, okay, we're not going to decide until there's a decision, they've still made a comment which is a lot of substance, and which is making PTI lawmakers amounted to an acquittal.
And how important it is, Khoka Saab, that of course Chief Justice, he has categorically said that he's waiting for the case to be decided in the High Court, and then he would be obviously deciding about it.
Yeah, and the statements yesterday, they amount to actually virtue signaling. So do you think that is not actually influencing the legal system itself?
Taisa, what the Chief Justice is saying, that I am waiting the decision of the Islamabad High Court, that support my legal contention, that until the High Court will not decide the matter, the Supreme Court cannot take the cognizance of that. And even if he taking the cognizance of the pending matter, it's not a live issue. So the more important thing is, when the Supreme Court has realized that the matter pending before him in such a nature which they cannot pass a legal order on that. So more important would be, and being a lawyer and being a bar association, and there has been so much comment on that, that while hearing the cases, the Supreme Court or any of the High Court, the judges should have not said like that, made an observation which is not part of their judicial order. So if they make such observation and becomes highlight in the media, electronic, and on the print side, definitely it would have some effects on the proceedings and made a different perception in the eyes of the public. So at that time, I mean, this has been starting from 2008 onward in our Supreme Court, and we are reporting and saying so many things which even have not been part of the judicial order, and make an otherwise observation in the eyes of the public, and more importantly, those people who are the litigants before the Supreme Court of Pakistan. So it is a very cautious area where the Supreme Court of the High Court and all the judges who are there, when they particularly see the media is there, they should talk about only those things which is relevant to the case. And if there is a certain question answer, they have a right to inquire of the lawyer.
This is the Supreme Court, and this is the Chief Justice of Pakistan, and this is not a drawing room conversation, of course, where you can just pass a remark and where we can then say, okay, you shouldn't have said that, that's not appropriate. This has consequences, and this has, as Farooq said, possibly influencing the ability to then, of course, with the certain decisions. And then the question is that if the Chief Justice can make such a remark, what is the consequence of that? Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have Hafiz Saab at the moment, and apparently we're out of time, and I would have loved to hear more on this question, but that's all we have from the debate. We're going to close right now, and we're going to speak tomorrow.